You know what the galaxy really hates? Humans. I mean, really, truly, deeply despises them. Not because they're particularly scary. Oh no, quite the opposite. It's because they're unpredictable, illogical, and somehow always manage to survive situations that should have killed them 17 times over. But this one's different. This is about how you should never ever underestimate a human who's decided they like you. Let me set the scene for you. The Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences on Velthara Prime. Think of it as the universe's most prestigious university. Except everyone there wants to kill each other for a better grade. Literally, we're talking species from 400 different worlds, all competing for the top positions that'll guarantee them cushy government jobs, military commissions, or research grants worth more than some planetary GDP figures. It's cutthroat, it's brutal, and honest, most of the time it's hilarious watching them destroy each other. Now, enter our protagonist, a Kaskathi named Tiris. Poor little Tiris. The Kaskathi are basically what you'd get if you crossed a grasshopper with a mathematician and gave them anxiety. They're small, fragile, about as physically imposing as a particularly aggressive houseplant, but brilliant at computational work. Tiris stood maybe 3.5 feet tall, had those big, multifaceted eyes that made him look perpetually startled, and moved with the nervous energy of someone who knew the universe was out to get him. Which, to be fair, it kind of was. Tiris had the unfortunate distinction of being the weakest student at the academy. Not academically, he was actually pretty decent at quantum mechanics. But physically, socially, politically, his species had no military power, no economic influence, and their homeworld produced nothing anybody wanted except really complicated math proofs. In the brutal social hierarchy of the academy, that put him somewhere between furniture and punching bag. The Kravari made sure he knew it. Big, reptilian brutes who looked like someone had given a crocodile steroids and a superiority complex. They ran the academy's unofficial power structure, and their leader, a particularly nasty piece of work named Grexith, had decided that making Tiris's life miserable was an entertaining hobby. Theft of research materials, accidental shoves in the hallways, public humiliation during seminars, the usual stuff that institutions always claim doesn't happen while looking the other way. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where the human comes in, Lyra Chen Martinez. And yes, I can already hear you complaining about the name, but this was before the great human naming controversy of 2247, so bear with me. Actually, you know what? She went by something else. Everyone called her Mars. There, happy now? Mars was the only human at the academy, and nobody quite knew what to make of her. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for about 15 years at this point, and their reputation preceded them in the worst possible way. They'd survived a solar flare that should have sterilized their planet, fought off 3 separate invasion attempts in their first decade of contact, and had a disturbing tendency to treat physics suggestions more like physics suggestions rather than laws. The other species found them unsettling. They were neither the strongest nor the smartest, but they had this terrifying quality of just not stopping. Mars was average height for a human, which made her tall by academy standards, with dark hair usually tied back in a practical bun, warm brown skin, and these eyes that seemed to notice everything. She didn't try to dominate social situations like the Kravari. She just observed, calculated, and moved through the academy like she was cataloging everyone for some purpose only. She understood. Most students avoided her. There were rumors, of course. Humans ate their enemies. Humans could survive in vacuum for short periods. Humans once won a war by being too stubborn to die. The usual nonsense that gets exaggerated in the retelling. Mars seemed content with the isolation, focusing on her engineering studies with an intensity that made professors nervous. The incident happened on a cold morning, well, cold by academy standards. Humans apparently found it pleasantly mild. Tiris was hurrying across the central plaza, clutching his datapad to his chest, trying to make it to his biochemistry class before Grexith and his cronies spotted him. He wasn't fast enough. Well. If it isn't the Academy's favorite insect, Grexith rumbled, stepping directly into Tiris's path. 2 other Kravari flanked him, creating a wall of scale and muscle. Tiris's antennae drooped, Please, I need to get to class. You need? Grexith's laugh sounded like rocks grinding together. What you need is to understand your place, little bug. It was the same routine as always. Grexith would knock Tiris's datapad away, scatter his materials, maybe rough him up a little if he was bored enough. The other students would walk past, eyes averted. The professors would claim they saw nothing, and Tiris would pick up his things with trembling limbs and try not to cry until he got somewhere private. Except this time, someone picked up the datapad before Grexith could kick it away. Mars straightened up, examining the device with casual interest. Biochem notes? Pretty advanced stuff. You're studying Professor Zillith's theories on protein synthesis. Everyone froze. Grexith's eyes narrowed. Human. This doesn't concern you. Mars looked up at him, and here's the thing about humans, that the galaxy was still learning. They have this way of meeting your eyes that makes you feel like they're measuring exactly how much trouble you're worth. Not afraid, not aggressive, just calculate. You're right. It doesn't, Mars said simply. She handed the datapad back to Tiris. But I'm making it concern me anyway. Go on to class. Tiris didn't move, frozen between terror and confusion. Nobody interfered with Grexith. Nobody. Did you just give me an order, primate? Grexith took a step forward, looming over Mars. He outweighed her by at least 200 pounds of muscle and armor-like scales. Mars didn't step back. Nope, just a suggestion. Strong one, though. The plaza had gone quiet. Students were watching now, sensing either a fight or entertainment. Probably both. Grexith smiled, showing way too many teeth. Your species is new here. Let me educate you about how things work. The weak get stepped on. That's nature. That's order. And right now, you're interfering with nature. Funny thing about nature, Mars said. And there was something in her voice now. Something that made the hair stand up on the back of necks for species that had hair. Humans aren't really big on following it. We kind of have this habit of telling nature to go screw itself and making our own rules instead. I wish you could have seen Grexith's face. The confusion, the anger, the dawning realization that this weird little species genuinely didn't understand they were supposed to be scared. Last chance, human. Walk away. Mars crossed her arms. Yeah, I'm good here. Thanks, though. That's when Grexith made his first mistake. He reached out to shove Mars aside, the same casual violence he'd used on Tiris 1,000 times. His hand never connected. Mars moved like water, like gravity shifted, just for her. She stepped inside his reach, grabbed his extended arm, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling forward. It wasn't even a throw, really, just a redirection. But Grexith wasn't expecting it. Wasn't expecting prey to fight back, and he crashed into a decorative fountain with a splash that echoed across the plaza. The silence was deafening. Grexith came up sputtering, scales dripping, looking like a very angry, very wet dinosaur. His companions moved to flank Mars, but she'd already shifted her stance, weight balanced, ready. Okay, she said conversationally, so we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Easy way. You apologize to, she glanced at Tiris's nameplate. Tiris here, and we all go about our day. Hard way. I demonstrate exactly why humans survived 3 invasion attempts in a decade, and you explain to the medical center why you need regeneration therapy. You dare. Yeah, I dare. Here's the thing about humans, big guy. We're persistence predators. Know what that means? It means we don't have to be stronger or faster. We just have to be willing to keep going longer than you. And trust me, I can make this very, very long and very, very embarrassing for you. Grexith looked around at the growing crowd, at the way other students were pulling out their recording devices, at the way his casual dominance had turned into a public spectacle. You could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. This isn't over, human. Sure feels over to me, Mars said cheerfully. But hey, anytime you want a rematch, you know where to find me. Grexith and his friends left, dripping and humiliated. And the crowd slowly dispersed, already spreading the story with the speed of gossip traveling through a university. Which is to say, instantly, Mars turned back to Tiris, who was still standing there like his brain had short-circuited. You okay? You. Why did you? Mars shrugged. Seemed like the right thing to do. Plus, I was curious about your biochem notes, and you can't really have a conversation about protein synthesis with someone when they're being bullied. Come on. I'll walk you to class. And that's how it started. With one human deciding that maybe, just maybe, she liked this nervous little mathematician who reminded her of, well, we'll get to that later. Tiris would later say that walking to class with Mars that day felt like walking next to a star going supernova. Everyone stared, everyone whispered, but nobody dared get close. For the first time in his 2 years at the academy, he made it to class on time, unstolen from, unmocked, and with all his materials intact. But here's what nobody realized yet. Not even Mars herself, she hadn't just made a friend that day. She'd made a choice. And when a human makes a choice about protecting someone, well, let's just say the galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson about human pack bonding. Loyalty, and why you should never ever mess with someone a human has decided to care about. Because what happened next? Oh, that's where this story really gets good. So here's what the Academy didn't understand about humans. And honestly, what most of the galaxy still struggles with. They bond. Not like normal species who form alliances based on mutual benefit or shared genetics. No, humans will just decide they like you. And suddenly, you're family. Doesn't matter if you're useful, doesn't matter if you're weak, doesn't matter if every logical calculation says the relationship costs more than it benefits. Once you're in, you're in. Tiris became Mars's project, though she'd punch you if you called it that. She preferred study partner, which was technically true but missed about 90% of what was actually happening. It started small. Mars would save him a seat in shared lectures. She'd eat lunch with him in the cafeteria, casually positioning herself between Tiris and any Kravari who wandered too close. She asked him questions about his research, actual genuine questions about quantum field theories and probability matrices that made his antennae perk up with excitement. For someone who'd spent 2 years being treated like a minor inconvenience, having another person actually interested in his thoughts was intoxicating. So wait, Mars said one afternoon in the library, chewing on her stylus in a way that made Tiris nervous. You're saying that if we apply your collapsed wave function model to the hyperdrive calculations, we could reduce power consumption by 8%. Possibly 12 if we account for the resonance cascade effect. But the calibration would be extremely sensitive. That's brilliant. Have you published this? Tiris's color shifted to a darker shade, the Kiksathi equivalent of blushing. I know. My faculty advisor said the paper wasn't worth submitting. Too theoretical, no practical applications. Mars stopped chewing her stylus. Who's your advisor? Professor Zilith. The same Zilith whose nephew is competing for the Varix Prize in Applied Physics? Well, yes, but... And your calculations would definitely win that prize if published? Tiris hadn't made the connection. Probably because he assumed people in positions of authority acted with integrity. Which, oh you sweet summer child. No, Mars smiled. And it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who just identified a problem and calculated exactly 17 ways to solve it, each more creative than the last. Right, we're fixing this. Fixing what? Mars, I can't accuse a professor of not accusing, bypassing. You're going to submit that paper to the Pan-Galactic Journal of Advanced Physics. Directly. I'll help you format it properly, and we'll cite Exelth's work appropriately, while making it very clear where his theories end and your innovations begin. But he'll be furious. He could fail me, ruin my academic career. Mars leaned back in her chair, and Tiris was learning to recognize this particular expression. It was the look she got when someone had crossed a line she'd drawn in her mind, a line that apparently now included him. Let him try, she said softly. I'd love to see him explain to the academic board why he rejected a prize-winning paper from his own student. The paper got published. It did win the Varix Prize, well, a shared prize with Tiris graciously splitting it with a Heparon researcher who'd independently verified similar results. Exelith tried to claim contributory credit, but the journal's peer review had been very clear about the provenance of the work. The whole incident made Tiris semi-famous in academic circles, and made Exelith look like he'd tried to suppress groundbreaking research. Mars bought them both celebratory pizza, real Earth pizza, shipped at horrific expense from the human colony on Proxima Station. Tiris couldn't actually eat it, but he appreciated the gesture. "You didn't have to do all that," he said, watching Mars demolish her third slice with impressive efficiency. "Sure I did. You're my friend. That's what friends do, friend." Tiris turned the word over in his mind like a puzzle piece he couldn't quite figure out how to place. He'd had colleagues, classmates, even research partners. But a friend? Someone who fought battles for you without being asked? Without expecting anything in return? Why me? The question came out before he could stop it. You could befriend anyone. The Heparon delegation wanted you on their engineering team. The Salthex Union offered you a sponsorship. Mars shrugged, picking at the crust. Those were transactions. Business deals dressed up as friendship. You know what you did when we met? You said thank you. After I helped you, your first words were thank you for interfering. Not what do you want, not I owe you. Just basic gratitude and kindness. You'd be surprised how rare that is. She paused, staring at something Tiris couldn't see, some memory playing behind her eyes. Besides, you remind me of my little brother, Tommy. He was small for his age, got picked on a lot, loved math more than breathing. I used to walk him home from school, scare off the bullies. Her voice softened. He died in the Proxima outbreak 3 years ago. Bacterial infection we didn't have immunity to yet. He was 15. Mars, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Just let me help you, okay? Let me do for you what I couldn't do for him. And that's when Tiris understood. This wasn't about him being special or deserving. It was about a human who'd lost someone and found a way to transmute grief into protection. He was carrying someone else's memory, someone else's love, and honestly, he was honored to do it. But the galaxy, as I mentioned, doesn't really do sentiment. And Grexith? He definitely didn't. The Kravari had been seething for weeks. Watching Tiris walk around under Mars's protection, watching him win awards and gain respect. It was unnatural, this weak little insect rising above his station, just because some human decided to play bodyguard. Something had to be done. Grexith wasn't stupid. That's important to remember. Brutal, yes, but not stupid. He knew he couldn't take Mars in a straight fight. That fountain incident had made it very clear she had training he didn't understand. So he did what bullies do when they can't attack directly. He got creative. The engineering final was the Academy's most important examination, a 12-hour practical test where students had to design, build, and demonstrate a functioning prototype based on a randomly assigned prompt. It was worth 40% of the final grade and could make or break careers. The test was proctored, secured, and theoretically impossible to sabotage. Theoretically, Mars's prompt was a microwave energy transfer system. Challenging, but well within her capabilities. She'd been preparing for weeks, had her component list memorized, knew exactly how she'd approach the build. She entered the testing bay confident, focused, ready. 6 hours in, her primary power coupling exploded. Not failed, exploded. Melted the housing, destroyed 3 surrounding components, and filled her testing bay with acrid smoke that triggered the environmental alarms. By the time the proctor cleared the bay and assessed the damage, Mars had lost 90 minutes and most of her core components. She didn't panic. Humans don't panic, they get methodical. She requisitioned replacement parts, recalculated her approach, and started rebuilding. She'd still have enough time if she worked perfectly, made 0 mistakes, and got very, very lucky. Then her secondary power coupling failed. Different design, different manufacturer, same catastrophic result. That's when Mars knew. 2 identical failures on different systems? That wasn't bad luck. That was sabotage. The proctor, a nervous Falxian named Cora, wrung her manipulators anxiously. I'm sorry, but without functional couplings, you cannot complete the examination. Academy regulations are clear. Give me 30 minutes, Mars said, and her voice had gone very calm, very flat. I can work around this. The specifications require. I can work around this. Something in her tone made Cora step back. 30 minutes. But if you cannot demonstrate a functional prototype, Mars was already moving, pulling apart her ruined components. extracting anything salvageable. Her hands moved with surgical precision, even as her mind raced through the implications. Someone had sabotaged her exam. Someone had access to her components before the test. Someone wanted her to fail badly enough to risk expulsion if caught. She knew who. Of course she knew who. But knowing and proving were different things, and right now she had a more immediate problem. 28 minutes later, she powered up a Frankenstein's monster of a device that looked nothing like the specifications, but functioned exactly as required. She'd bypassed the power couplings entirely, using a distributed network of smaller capacitors that she'd literally salvaged from broken equipment in the bay's recycling bin. It was ugly, inefficient, and absolutely brilliant. Cora stared at the readings. This works. It's completely non-standard, uses components that aren't even on the approved list. But it works. Improvisation, Mars said tiredly. Very human skill. Are we done here? She passed. Barely, because the non-standard components cost her points for not following specifications, but she passed. When she finally dragged herself out of the testing bay 12 hours and 40 minutes later, she found Tiris waiting outside, practically vibrating with anxiety. I heard there was an incident. Are you okay? Did you pass? What happened? Mars told him. All of it. The sabotage, the workaround, the deliberate destruction of her exam. Tiris's color shifted through several shades of emotions humans couldn't readily identify, but the final one was something like rage filtered through determination. Grexith, almost certainly. We need to report this, file a complaint with the academic board, and say what? That I suspect sabotage but have zero proof. The components are destroyed, the testing bay's been cleaned, and Grexith too smart to leave evidence. Mars sat down heavily on a bench, exhaustion finally catching up. He got away with it, Tiris. Sometimes the bad guys win. No? The firmness in Tiris's voice made Mars look up. The small Kiksathi was standing straighter than she'd ever seen him, antennae rigid with determination. No, he repeated. You protected me. You fought for me when nobody else would. You helped me publish my research, kept Grexith away from me, treated me like I mattered. Now it's my turn. Tiris, I appreciate the sentiment, but what exactly do you know what the Kiksathi are really good at, Mars? Better than any species in the galaxy? Quantum mathematics, pattern recognition, data analysis, finding connections nobody else sees. Tiris's multifaceted eyes gleamed. And I just happen to have access to the Academy's maintenance logs, security footage timestamps, and supply chain records through my research database permissions. Give me 6 hours. 4 hours later, because Tiris was apparently even better than advertised, they had everything. Footage of Grexith accessing the component storage room under a forged maintenance authorization. Records of power coupling purchases that matched the failed units. Communication logs showing Grexith coordinating with a corrupt supply technician. Even financial records of bribes paid. It was beautiful. It was comprehensive. It was absolutely, irrefutably damning. Mars looked at the compiled evidence with something like awe. How did you even access half of these systems? Tiris made a sound that might have been a laugh. Turns out, when you're considered harmless and forgettable, people don't bother changing their passwords after you help them with technical problems. I've had backdoor access to 37 Academy systems for 18 months. Tiris, you magnificent, devious little, I prefer thorough researcher. They submitted the evidence anonymously to the academic board, the security office, and because Tiris had learned some things from Mars about making sure justice stuck, 3 major galactic news networks. Grexith was expelled within 48 hours. The supply technician was fired and faced criminal charges. The Academy had to issue a formal apology and implement new security protocols, and the Krivari delegation withdrew from several Academy programs in embarrassment, their reputation for strength and honor taking a significant hit when it came out that they'd resorted to sabotaging exams. Mars found Tiris in the library, reading through research papers like nothing had happened. You know they're calling you the Invisible Avenger on the Academy forums, Mars said, sliding into the seat across from him. Ridiculous nickname. I'm quite visible, if people bother to look. You just took down the most powerful student faction at the Academy using nothing but data and determination. Tiris finally looked up from his paper. You jumped into a fight with someone twice your size because he was being mean to me. I think we're even now. Mars laughed. Genuinely laughed for the first time since the exam sabotage. Yeah, I guess we are. Actually, Tiris said carefully. I believe we're in debt. To who? To each other. You protect me physically. I protect you systematically. You fight the battles I can't. I fight the battles you can't. It's what did you call it? Being friends? Mars felt something warm and tight in her chest, the kind of feeling she hadn't let herself experience since Tommy died. Yeah, that's exactly what friends do. Good, because I was analyzing the graduate program applications, and I noticed we're both interested in the Hyperdriver Innovation Initiative. They take teams of 2 researchers. I thought perhaps, are you asking me to be your research partner for the next 4 years? I'm asking you to keep being my friend who happens to collaborate on revolutionary propulsion system designs. Mars extended her hand across the table. Deal. Tiris reached out with one delicate limb and touched her palm. The human gesture he'd learned meant agreement, trust, partnership. And that's the story of how the galaxy's weakest student earned the galaxy's strongest protector, and then became a protector himself. Because here's the thing about humans that the galaxy keeps learning the hard way. They don't just fight for you, they teach you to fight for yourself. They don't just protect you, they make you stronger. And when you earn a human's loyalty, you get more than a bodyguard, you get a partner, a teacher, a friend who'll burn down the whole galaxy if someone tries to hurt you. And maybe, if you're lucky, you learn to do the same for them. Mars and Tiris went on to revolutionize hyperdrive technology, published 47 papers together, and maintained their friendship for the next 30 years until Tiris passed away peacefully in his sleep surrounded by students and colleagues who respected him. Mars spoke at his funeral. She told the story of a fountain, a datapad, and one act of kindness that changed both their lives. She talked about Tommy, about loss, about finding family in the strangest places. And she ended with this. Tiris once asked me why I helped him. The truth is, he helped me more than I ever helped him. He reminded me that kindness isn't weakness, that protection goes both ways, that the smallest person in the room can be the strongest when they fight for what matters. He taught me that being human isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the toughest. It's about deciding who you'll protect and then never ever backing down. The galaxy learned a lot from their partnership. About humans, about the Kixathi, about what happens when 2 supposedly incompatible species decide that friendship matters more than logic. But the most important lesson? The one that's still taught in Academy ethics classes to this day? Never underestimate someone a human has decided to care about, because that human will move planets to keep them safe. And if you're very lucky, you'll earn the same loyalty in return. That's the story. That's how one act of kindness earned the weakest student the galaxy's strongest protector, and how that protector found someone worth protecting who taught her how to be protected in return. Pretty good for a couple of misfits who nobody expected to amount to anything.